and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, SIF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Aaron Spears. And Aaron, as the festival continues, we'll begin to hear which films and filmmakers are winning awards at SIF 45 streams.
Absolutely, Dee. We've got, from the Roxanne T. Mueller Audience Choice Award, the New Directions, Global Health, Local Heroes competitions. The festival's always been committed to shining a light on fresh visions in filmmaking.
And this year, SIF has unveiled a new award, the Groundbreaker Award, which is to be given to a pioneering filmmaker in their field whose work has proven to lift up marginalized voices. Joining us for this episode of SIF Speaks is the first winner of that award, Ashley OShea, the director, cinematographer, and producer of the film Unapologetic. Ashley, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you on SIF Speaks.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be part of the festival.
I want to start with some of the early scenes of your film where a group of young Black protesters is entering a Chicago restaurant where the clientele appears to be all white. And the protesters are there to draw attention to the killing of Black citizens at the hands of the city's police. It's really compelling to watch, but I wondered if there was another reason you chose this encounter for the beginning of the film.
Yeah, I mean, that scene was not always in the place that it is now. We actually workshopped a few different openings for the film, and we're really just struggling for a way to kind of like bring folks into the action without a lot of explanation or background or context. So after a few rough cut screenings, we just had the idea of like, let's try this. It's called, the action's called Black Brunch. And we were like, well, let's try this at the top of the film because, it's hitting on a lot of the themes and the topics of the film, but it's not specifically around one of the killings or like one organizer or activist. It kind of drops you right into the action and you immediately have to kind of contemplate where you stand on that scale. If you're a brunch goer or a protester or both. And so we just decided to try it up top since it had all of those great characteristics. And then, it just propels you right into the energy of young Black activists and organizers in Chicago at the time.
And speaking of Chicago, you also seem to make the city itself a character. Was establishing a sense of place important to the story you were telling?
Yes, absolutely. Chicago is a very unique space in terms of its organizing. It's kind of infamously known as the birthplace of community organizing. And so as I was kind of learning and growing in my knowledge around the city and around the community organizing that was happening here, there was an energy and electricity that I wanted to lay out for the context of the film. And, especially in terms of the Black community, there's just so many wonderful, amazing things. The music, the culture, the arts, like all of those sort of background points are really important in kind of laying out the lives of these two activists. They're definitely being influenced by the environment that they're in.
Actually, with Unapologetic being your debut feature film, I was wondering what kind of productions you've been working on before you took this filmmaking step.
Yeah, before Unapologetic. So I started Unapologetic kind of right after I graduated from college. So prior to that, I had really only worked on smaller, I was still doing student productions. And then throughout the course of production, I was working in the city as a freelance cinematographer. So that gave me an opportunity to kind of sharpen my skills on other documentaries, as well as commercial and branded and sometimes short, narrative content.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a lot of it was by way of me working as a cinematographer more so than as a director, doing that in tandem with the long haul that was Unapologetic.
We saw you had a credit on a film that played last year at the festival here, Represent. As well.
Yeah. With Hillary, yeah.
Was that while you were still in college, or was that part of the? I know documentary schedules are a little weird, so.
No, college was 5, 6 years ago now, but Represent was Yeah, no, Represent, I did it like one or two scenes I shot for Hillary.
Oh, cool.
Because we're pretty familiar because of Kartemquin, and she also we both went to Northwestern, so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, what were some of the new challenges you faced with this longer documentary format?
Just learning how to make a feature-length film. Yeah, I mean, probably somewhere around the 2.5 year mark, I really had to just accept the process for what it was. Because although you can definitely go into a documentary with a blueprint and an idea of the narrative that you want to lay out, I knew that there was just important touchstones in both Janae and Bella's lives that I just couldn't rush. It was gonna happen when it was gonna happen, especially with Janae, trying to get her PhD. So I really had to learn to just kind of control what I could, but then to just like let the process happen naturally outside of that. And I'm still learning now, because it's like every step was just like production was me getting better at shooting a documentary film. Post was like kind of returning to my roots as more of a narrative filmmaker in school. And so, going back to the drawing board with the 3-act structure and character development and all those sorts of things. And now I'm just learning so much as we like distribute the film, trying to figure out the best types of homes for it, and, have some sort of impact campaign that can help us get it into the hands of like community activists and organizers.
Sure.
So yeah, I could write a book probably on everything that I learned.
Or a film about a film.
Oh goodness, yes.
That's very meta.
Like, that's just me out.
I'm always curious with documentaries, like especially of this nature. Like, this is a perfect example. Like you're letting the narrative evolve as you're filming it, even if you have some narrative ideas going into it. Was there a moment where you were like, okay, that's a wrap, this is the film, we got it now?
Yeah, well, there were two moments like that. One was definitely when Janae, when she got approved for her dissertation and became like an official PhD candidate.
Mm-hmm.
That was always in my head. Like, when that happens, we have the full arc.
Yeah, built-in timeline that way.
Yeah, but with Bella, it was a little bit more difficult. But I think once we started to develop the storyline just about her family, her mother being in prison and her brother, and just like that whole history within her family, when we were able to go down to visit her brother in prison, I think that was actually the last thing that we shot, legit. So it was kind of like, once we got to that access point with her and with her family, it felt like we had gotten deep enough that it could resonate with audiences, and kind of put a nice bow on her storyline.
Yeah,
I was curious, what put the two women that you were following, Janae and Bella, in front of your cameras in the first place? How did you focus on them?
Yeah, so Janae I contacted first because she was the leader in Black Youth Project 100, and at the time there was so much happening in the organizing community around the killing of Rakia Boyd. And so I was really just drawn in by the fact that a lot of the organizing that was happening was being led by young Black women, queer folks, just people that I hadn't really seen in my formal education when talking about Black social movements. So, with Janae just being one of the leaders in the space, I just kind of cold emailed her, and she was immediately down, even though at the time it was like in the context of a short film and not a feature. But, once I learned about her being in her PhD program and still doing like grassroots organizing, and her she was like 24 at the time, I was just really interested in like how she was going to balance all of those different things. And so then a little bit after that, when the tape of the killing of Laquan McDonald came out, that just kind of milestone in the city indicated to me that my project was probably meant to be bigger than just Janae or just like this short film. That's when I started to interview other young Black organizers, and I attended a celebration in front of the Chicago Police Board headquarters, and Bella performed, and I was like, "What is all this energy in this small package?" And so, I just kind of wrapped her into that interview process. But, through that interview, finding more about her family, her being from Chicago, from the West Side, I just felt like it would give a good balance to Janae's story. And, they both have really fierce and strong energy in different ways. So we always were trying to balance that out throughout the film and, not make one person the front or the back. I think they ended up complementing each other really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a little bit about learning about the movement, and through your film, I was too, because in the course of it, some of the Black female activists that you're filming talk about the movement and themselves as abolitionists. And that's not a word I heard in a 21st century context before your film. So I was curious how you understood it and what they were doing and applying that idea to their work.
Yeah, I was in the same place as you when filming began, and grew a lot in my knowledge around what abolition means, what defunding the police means. And for Janae and Bella, it's definitely this idea that we can build the world that we want and that we envision. And that is a world that doesn't necessarily include police and prisons and punitive systems that claim to keep us safe, but a lot of times actually don't. And so just learning even about Chicago and how, like 40% of the city budget goes towards policing. The police are spending $4 million a day on their operations or on police settlements. And so it's really just like re-examining those systems. And, I think what's important and what I really learned from them is like, it's not going to be like a one thing fixes all types situation. It's definitely progressive and something that will slowly have to be adapted to in our society. But even this last summer with the uprisings around Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, that was the first time I heard people talking about defunding the police like on a national level. Like they have been talking about it for a long time in Chicago, but to the point where major cities were talking about defunding their police departments and, abolition and all these sorts of things, that gives me hope that we can get there if we just, take it step by step.
Actually, you mentioned Janae and her PhD dissertation or her presentation, and that was a moment that really struck me in the movie because I guess I would say I'm borderline obsessed with the way music is used in documentary because it's so different than narrative films. And that moment was so it's an overwhelming moment of joy for her. And I was thinking about it after I watched it. I was like, that's one of those scenes where you'd have like the swell of music in a narrative film, but you kept it very low key and just let us sit with her in that moment, which I love. So that's my long preface to how did you go about using music in this documentary?
Well, we had an amazing composer named Sam Trump, who I worked closely with when we picture locked the film to kind of indicate, lay out all of the different cues and even very specifically kind of setting moods and feelings with different. So we had like kind of a soundscape that we always use when we were talking about like giving background context to Rakia Boyd or Laquan McDonald. And then, we had the more hopeful cues. And then we had like the Laquan McDonald scene or protest scene where it's just like everything at once. So I think it really helped throughout before we even picture like of course we used a lot of temp tracks to kind of figure out how we were going to eventually use composition in the full piece. And so I really just tried to base it off of like what's happening in the film. I am adverse to movies that like overuse music. I don't like music to tell somebody how to feel, but I do think that it can complement the action that's happening in a scene. So I just tried to use my base gut instinct on that. And there were certainly times where we would put something in and I was like, this is too much, or this is not the right mood. And I think specifically with that last scene, I think partially because I was also there filming it with Janae. Like I just knew how much emotion was in there, and I was like, we don't need any, we didn't need anything else. Like you got to sit with it, and then it doesn't go into like the final cue from that. But yeah, I actually think it's like more exciting to figure out the scenes where you don't need music, and then because then when you do use it, it's really special, and people remember it for not getting in the way of their viewing of it. So
yeah. On a similar music note, there's a scene where we're with Bella. She's in a studio with two members of the Sister Survivor Network, which is kind of music based, but she has a line there that really, really struck me, where she says this, I'm sorry, not a line. This isn't scripted, but she says, this is very new. The idea of this being work, protests being work, advocating for people in prison being work. This has always been life to her. I was wondering, since the film is called Unapologetic, is this a feeling that you share with the documentary work that you're doing as well?
I mean, I think in a sense, definitely. Like I share with you, I didn't plan. I was much more interested or thinking that my career would be moving in the direction of being a DP full time. And so even coming into Unapologetic or making the decision to direct Unapologetic was a feeling of alignment and feeling like, this was a way that I can contribute to a moment in a way that felt organic to me. And so, yeah, that's kind of my messaging at this point for folks that even want to get involved with the movement for Black lives. Like, you have to think about where your skills are already at and how you can best, serve the movement where you're at instead of trying to force yourself into something. Because that's when you run into issues of burnout and sustainability and all of those things. And so, looking ahead in my career or what's happening next, I'm definitely cognizant of those feelings of, again, because I don't want to. I know that if I'm not 100% into something or feel like it's aligning, that I'm not going to. You kind of need that to keep going when you're making a documentary, because there's just so much unknown. And so I know that if I have a deep-seated purpose to want to do it and to follow a story, that it'll eventually get done. Maybe not in the streamlined way that I want it to, but I know that I have the energy to at least keep trying.
So you're not in it for the big documentary paychecks, is what you're saying.
When you find those paychecks, let me know.
I will let you know.
That's funny. But on that same note of sustainability, when I was hearing about the Sister Survivor Network, they were described in the film as an organization by and for Black women in film who've been directly and disproportionately affected by prison policy. I was wondering if you had connections to that network or if there were other supportive groups who helped you along the way in terms of finishing the film.
Well, Sister Survivor Network specifically was created by Bella, actually, as part of her Soros Justice Fellowship. So I was there for just the genesis of the group, and it was actually a harder thing to put in the film because it had happened a lot earlier than like the actual timeline of the film. Okay. But in terms of like other groups and just connections, like we definitely, like as we wrote the film out and started to talk about impact and the communities we want to see this, it's been great to connect with like local Chicago orgs. We did a strategy summit back in October where we talked to groups like A Long Walk Home and the NAP Ministry and Color of Change that have these different kind of touch points to the social movement. And we're definitely still trying to have that emphasis on Black women and girls, on queer folks, on folks that are marginalized even within our community itself. Yeah, it was great, because we were filming in a lot of those spaces over the course of production. It's great now to be able to have those connections as we try to give folks a resource, to talk about their organizing work and to remember the work that they have done, and hopefully to be able to see themselves in these roles as Black women and girls, because that's not often what we're afforded or given access to. So yeah, I mean that, and then the Sister Survivor Network, that event was just like, we only showed a snippet of it, but it was like beautiful just to see people holding space and talking. I think there was just so much healing and power in that mm-hmm. we can solve a lot of world problems by doing that. So
absolutely.
Cool.
We mentioned your work filming a little bit on the film Represent, which played at the festival last year.
Mm-hmm.
That was put out through Kartemquin Films, similar to your film. So I was wondering how you got involved with them and what was their role in production or distribution, or their role within this film in general.
Yeah, Kartemquin is the reason this film exists. I started the project as part of their internship program. So I was an intern there at the beginning. And then right after, I kind of just rolled into they have a fellowship called Diverse Voices in Docs that helps first-time filmmakers of color develop their first feature-length films. So I developed that for about 6 months with them, and that really helped me to just like keep going and like have a checkpoint to motivate me.
Sure.
And then they just really connected with the project from the beginning. And so after that, we started to talk about developing the film with them. And then eventually we grew into this co-production role that we're in now, where we get, previously we were able to get like editorial support, find like grants, applying to those support for that. We were able to get distribution support, impact support. It's just been, across the board, a really wonderful partnership, especially as a first-time filmmaker. So yeah, I'm still talking to them all the time and getting their advice on things. So
excellent. I wanted to ask also towards the end here, since we're not able to gather together in person all in the same space as a community to watch your film this year, what would be your introduction to an audience before they push play on your film during this festival?
That's a good question. I'm like, I don't talk to audiences anymore. No, I'm so grateful that people even take the time to bring the film into their homes. It's a important piece. It's an intimate piece. It's a piece that will hopefully have you questioning the institutions and the policing of brutality that's happening in your own cities, and hopefully it's bringing up some righteous rage in you. But at the same time, there's a lot of hope in that. And like I said, I think there's room for everybody in this moment. We just have to make sure we're applying our skills where they can best be used. So, to not feel defeated or despondent after you're done watching it, to try to figure out what's happening in your communities around the movement for Black Lives and more, because there's so many ways to plug in. And yeah, it's just, a 90-minute session of getting to know these two wonderful women. And I hope they can connect with them as much as I did.
Yeah. And that's half of the answer to the next question I want to ask. But it takes me back to the protest in the restaurant scene that we talked about earlier. An employee at the place looks at your camera, and asks about the demonstration. What does it help? And I wanted to have you answer that question, applied to your film. What does it help?
Yeah, I mean, I think it opens up the conversation of what Black leadership looks like. We don't all have to be these great orators or religious leaders or academics to be able to contribute. And so I hope that it helps people reimagine, who we look to for our answers in our society. Sorry, I'm like cracking up.
I'm impressed.
Who we look to, I'm trying to double time it. But yeah, who we look to for leadership in our communities. And I hope that as Black women specifically, I hope they can look at it, like I said, and see themselves and remember the Black women in their lives that have influenced them, watched over them, allowed them to grow and change into the leaders that they are, the people that they are. That those opinions and those views are more important to me than anything else. So
great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for talking with us, and congratulations on winning the Groundbreaker Award.
Thank you. Yes, I can't believe that one, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
And hopefully we will see you in person to have a conversation with future films once we get out of this whole
Definitely.
situation here.
I have a lot of IOU festivals, so I'm taking you up on that.
All right. Sounds good.
Great. Take care.
All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Ashley OShea is the director, cinematographer, and producer of the film Unapologetic. She's also the winner of the Cleveland International Film Festival's first Groundbreaker Award. You can get details about streaming Unapologetic when you log on to the SIF website, clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
Many thanks to our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. We also invite you to support your local film festival. Please consider a donation to the SIF Challenge Match presented by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Our goal is to reach $145,000 this year to support the future of our festival, and we're so grateful for any amount you're able to contribute. To donate, please visit clevelandfilm.org, and thank you for listening to SIF Speaks.